We were prepared for war, or so we thought. We, the Kulen, had the most advanced technology, the sharpest minds, and the strongest warriors. But in our arrogance, we ignored the simplest rule of survival. Never underestimate something, especially something you don't fully understand. When Aurora woke up aboard the Nexus Prime, her eyes scanned the sterile, metallic walls of her confinement chamber with a calm that was beyond what we expected. We had read about the so-called human spirit, but in person, it was something else. She was no longer just a subject for our tests. She was the beginning of something new, something none of us, not even Dr. Pax, could predict. When she realized she was our prisoner, she didn't scream or beg. Instead, she merely observed, calculated, and smiled. An unsettling, self-assured smile. "Am I your test subject now?" Aurora had asked. I didn't know how to answer at first. Was she? Technically, yes. But there was something about her, a spark that didn't belong in the sterile, scientific environment we had created. It was a spark that made us all uneasy, even as we convinced ourselves that we were simply studying her for the greater good. What followed was a mixture of frustration and fascination. Our teams studied her physiology, checked her responses, and marveled at her adaptability. But it was always her spirit, her mind, that stood out. She had no fear. Her sense of humor was dry, bordering on sardonic. She showed us, the so-called superior beings, the very same confidence and defiance we expected from our most dangerous enemies. Admiral Kren, who initially thought this human would be easy to manipulate, found himself caught off guard by her. The first time he tried to command her, she simply replied with a nonchalant shrug, "You're going to need a better strategy than that." At that moment, I realized that perhaps we had been the ones manipulated all along. We continued with our plans, proceeding with the enhancement serum. It was meant to make our warriors unbeatable. After all, the Drakes had devastated entire fleets with ease. They were a relentless force of nature, and we needed to fight fire with fire. But our fire was about to meet a much greater blaze. The serum we had designed for the Kultorian physiology worked, at least on paper. Our soldiers became faster, stronger, with greater healing capabilities. But the human serum, well, that was something else. It didn't just work, it transformed. Aurora, our test subject, was evolving at a pace none of us could track. Her strength and speed increased, sure, but so did her senses. She was seeing the world around her in ways that we couldn't even begin to understand. And her mind was opening, expanding like a galaxy unto itself. By the second day of the experiment, she had not only gained a perfect understanding of our language, but also of our culture, our technology, and our weaknesses. "I can hear your thoughts, Zorn," she said one evening. "You're not as clever as you think." I had been monitoring her vitals, but in that moment I felt a shiver run down my spine. She wasn't just speaking metaphorically. There was something in her voice, in the way her golden eyes gleamed with certainty, that made me wonder if we had crossed a line we couldn't uncross. It was on the third day, when her mind reached unimaginable levels of processing, that the real transformation began. As the final stage of the serum took hold, Aurora's body didn't reject it. She absorbed it, became something else entirely. When the neural enhancement triggered in her, we all feared the worst. Kultorian test subjects had died in the process, brains fried, bodies torn apart by the serum's acceleration. But Aurora didn't die. She awoke. Her first words, spoken in a voice that was both eerily calm and brimming with something otherworldly, were simple. "That was quite an experience." It was an impossible moment. We thought the serum would fail again, that it would do what it always did, kill. But it didn't. Aurora didn't die, she transformed. She had gone through the worst of the process. Her body twisted and contorted as the serum pushed her to the brink of death. But when she woke, there was something undeniably different about her. Her eyes glowed with an intensity that wasn't human. Her skin, once pale, now seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The moment her eyes opened, the room felt smaller, like the air itself had thickened with the weight of something far greater than all of us. The first thing she did was look around. She didn't scream, didn't panic. She was still herself, but different. She sat up with a grace that didn't belong in a human. She pulled the monitoring devices off her body as if they were nothing more than dust on her skin. There was no fear in her movements, just an unsettling calm that unnerved everyone in the room. "I can feel the energy of the ship," she said, her voice resonating with a power we hadn't anticipated. "I can hear the hum of your engines, feel the vibrations of the walls, even smell your fear." She turned to me then, her eyes narrowing as if she could see through me into something deep inside. I'm not your test subject anymore. I'm something else now. I took a cautious step back, my heart pounding. How could this be happening? How could a simple human survive the serum and thrive? Dr. Pax, who had overseen the experiment, appeared frozen. Her neural capacity, she whispered almost to herself, it's beyond anything we've seen before. But even Dr. Pax, brilliant as she was, didn't understand the true scale of Aurora's change. None of us did. Aurora rose to her feet slowly, her body moving with the fluidity of a predator. The metallic floor beneath her seemed to hum, almost vibrating in response to her presence. I can hear all of you, she said, her voice now a low murmur. I can hear your thoughts, your fear, your confusion, and I can feel your desperation. You wanted to make me stronger, but you didn't realize what you'd created. You didn't realize I could do more than just survive. I could control this. Her words were heavy, each one a weight that pressed down on my chest. I could feel it, the power emanating from her. Admiral Kren, who had stood at the back of the room, suddenly spoke up. His voice was shaky, uncertain. "What have you done to her?" he demanded, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. Dr. Pax stepped forward, trying to maintain control. This is not what we expected. She should be dead by now." But Aurora wasn't listening to them. She was watching the monitors, studying them with an intensity that was nothing like the curiosity she had shown when she first arrived. The ship's alarms suddenly blared, cutting through the silence. "Drakes," Kren muttered. "They've found us." I felt a chill in the pit of my stomach. The Drakes had arrived, their warships closing in on our position faster than we could react. Our fleet wasn't prepared. We weren't ready for a fight with them, not yet. Aurora, however, didn't seem fazed. She stood there, her golden eyes flashing as she turned toward the viewport, watching the incoming ships. Her expression was calm, almost bored. "You're losing, aren't you?" she asked, her voice quiet but carrying through the room. Kren glared at her. "We don't have time for your games, human." Aurora didn't flinch. She just smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "I'm not playing a game. I'm trying to help. You just don't realize it yet." Without another word, she moved past us, her footsteps light and swift. Guards attempted to stop her, but with a wave of her hand, they were knocked aside like children. She was too fast, too strong. It was like watching a force of nature move through the ship. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She wasn't just human anymore. She was something far beyond us. Part 2 continued, the first battle. Aurora reached the control deck before any of us could catch up to her. By the time I arrived, she was already standing before the massive tactical screen, studying the Drake's ships in their formation. "You don't have the firepower to stop them," she said, her voice flat. "Your weapons are useless." "What do you suggest we do, then?" Kren asked, his voice tight with frustration. Aurora turned to face him, her eyes glowing brighter. "Give me access to your systems. I can reconfigure them. Your weapons will work if you know how to use them." I could see the hesitation in Kren's eyes. The idea of allowing a prisoner, an enhanced human, access to our systems was unthinkable. But then again, nothing about this situation was normal. We were desperate. "Do it," Kren ordered, his voice low. "But if this fails, it will be on your head." Aurora smiled, that unsettling smile, as she placed her hands on the command console. For a moment, nothing happened. The air seemed to hum with energy, and then the systems lit up. "Done," she said simply. "Now fire when ready." The bridge fell silent. Kren hesitated, then turned to the weapons officer. "Fire." The main batteries fired, the energy blast streaking toward the incoming Drake's warships. What should have been ineffectual energy bursts turned into precise, devastating hits. The Drake's shields, known to be impervious to most energy weapons, crumbled in the face of our newly adjusted targeting systems. The first warship exploded in a massive burst of light. Then another, and another. The Drake's fleet, once so feared, was reduced to debris in a matter of minutes. I stood there frozen. This was impossible. How could she have done this? Aurora turned to face us, covered in the blue blood of the Drakes, but completely unfazed. She was smiling, but there was no joy in it, just a quiet, knowing smile. "That's how it's done," she said. The bridge was silent, save for the low hum of the ship's engines. The battle was over. The Drake's warships, once thought to be invincible, lay in pieces across the black void. I could still hear the echoes of Aurora's words ringing in my mind. "That's how it's done." She had saved us, but at what cost? The crew stood motionless, unable to process what had just happened. How could a human, a single test subject, have wiped out an entire fleet of Drake's warships with nothing but her mind? My mind, too, raced with questions, questions that we would never get answers to. But more pressing was the question of what we had just unleashed. Admiral Kren was the first to speak, his voice hoarse, almost reverent. What are you? Aurora turned to face him, wiping the blue blood from her hands. I'm what you made me, she replied softly, her voice distant, detached. But I'm not just a weapon. I've become something else entirely. Her golden eyes, once full of defiance and humor, now glowed with a sense of purpose that unsettled me. She wasn't just our ally. She was something beyond us. Kren's voice trembled as he tried to regain control of the situation. You've proven your usefulness, but we can't. Aurora raised her hand, and the words died in Kren's throat. There was no force behind it, but the way she moved, the way she spoke, commanded silence. You want to control me, but you can't, not anymore. The air in the room grew heavy. I could feel it. The tension, the unspoken truth. She wasn't just a test subject anymore. She had evolved into something we couldn't control, something more powerful than all of us, and we had no idea what to do with her. Part 3 continued, the new era. Days passed, but the unease in the crew didn't fade. Aurora, despite her achievements, remained distant, almost aloof. She spent her time alone in the ship's command center, running simulations and analyzing data from the Drake's ships she had destroyed. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the changes we had witnessed in her. Her strength, her intelligence, her ability to control technology with nothing more than her mind, it was overwhelming. She was beyond human. She was something more. One evening, I approached her. She was sitting in front of a holographic display, her fingers tracing the glowing projections of enemy ships and tactical maps. I hesitated for a moment, then spoke. Aurora, what are you doing? I asked, my voice tentative. What's happening to you? She looked up, her golden eyes gleaming in the low light. I'm learning, she replied softly, learning faster than you can keep up. I couldn't help but feel a pang of fear at her words. We had created something beyond our understanding, and I wasn't sure if it was a blessing or a curse. I've accessed your databases, Zorn, she continued. I've seen your history, your wars, your culture. You're not ready for what's coming. The Drakes are just one part of a much larger picture. I frowned, confusion clouding my thoughts. What do you mean, what larger picture? She stood up, walking towards me with a grace that was almost predatory. I mean that you've been fighting the wrong enemy all along. There are forces out there, more powerful than you can imagine. The Drakes were just the beginning. I swallowed hard. What are you going to do? Aurora smiled, but it wasn't the cold, unsettling smile I had seen before. This time, there was something else in her expression, determination. I'm going to stop them, she said simply. And that was when I realized the greatest mistake we had made was not in the Serum, but in creating someone who could change the course of history. Someone who could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. But as much as I feared what she had become, I couldn't ignore the truth. We needed her, more than we ever had before. Part 3 continued, the power of choice. Aurora had changed, but so had our understanding of her. We thought we had created a weapon, a tool to fight our enemies. But she had become a force, one that was not easily controlled. In fact, she wasn't controlled at all. The next day, Admiral Kren called a meeting. He didn't even try to hide his concern this time. We can't allow this to continue, he said, his voice low and filled with uncertainty. Aurora is too powerful. She could turn on us, and if she does, we won't be able to stop her. I glanced at the rest of the officers around the table. There was fear in their eyes, fear that I shared. Aurora was no longer just an experiment. She was the fulcrum upon which the balance of power had shifted, and we didn't know where she would take us next. She has already proven herself, Dr. Pack said, her voice calm but firm. We should try to understand what she has become. We need to work with her, not against her. Kren slammed his fist on the table, causing the room to go quiet. We can't trust her. She's a human, a test subject. She was never meant to have this kind of power. We can't afford to ignore her now, I said, speaking up. She's the only reason we survived the Drake's attack, and she's the only reason we'll survive what's coming next. The room fell silent once again. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on us. The High Command was divided, unsure of what to do. The same fear that had kept them in control for so long was now working against them. But in that moment, I realized that it wasn't just about fear. It was about trust. And if we were going to survive, we would have to trust Aurora. She's not just a human, I continued, my voice steady. She's something more, and maybe, just maybe, that's what we need. The days that followed the Drake's battle were nothing short of chaotic. The Nexus Prime had gone from a research vessel focused on survival to the heart of a revolution we hadn't anticipated. The crew, once united in their mission, was now divided. Some believed Aurora was the key to victory, the weapon we had always needed. Others feared what she might become, seeing her evolution as a threat, not an asset. I couldn't blame them. Every time I saw her, I was reminded of how small and insignificant we were compared to what she had become. It wasn't just her strength or speed, it was the way she thought. She could see things that were hidden from the rest of us, things we couldn't begin to understand. The morning after the Drake's warships were destroyed, I visited her in her quarters, not knowing what to expect. She had been quiet for hours, packing the small space, deep in thought. When I entered, she was staring at a small hologram of Earth, watching the oceans ripple across the blue planet. I hesitated for a moment. "Aurora," I asked softly. She didn't turn to face me. "You're wondering what comes next, aren't you, Zorn?" I was taken aback. "How did you?" She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "I can hear your thoughts, remember." I nodded slowly. The power she had gained was no longer just a physical change. Her mind, her perception of the world, had expanded in ways we could never have predicted. I felt like a child in her presence, struggling to understand what she had become. "Why Earth?" I asked. "Why are you looking at it?" Aurora's gaze softened as she turned to me. "Because it's still home," she said quietly. "No matter what I've become, no matter how far I've come, Earth is where it all started. It's where I was just a human, a hiker from Montana." I could see the pain behind her eyes, a flicker of humanity that still lingered. She wasn't just a weapon. She wasn't just a tool. She was someone who had lost everything, the life she knew, the world she loved, and had been thrust into a role she had never asked for. I wanted to say something comforting, but the words felt hollow. How could I comfort her when I barely understood her myself? How could I reconcile the woman standing before me with the human I had once studied? She saw the confusion in my eyes and gave a small, rueful laugh. "You don't get it, do you?" I shook my head. "I don't understand how this happened, how you became this." Aurora's eyes hardened, but there was no anger in them, just a quiet resolve. "It wasn't just the serum, Zorn. It was what you, your people, wanted from me. You wanted me to be something more than human. You wanted me to be a weapon, a tool to fight your battles. And maybe that's what I am. But I'm also more than that now. I'm evolving, and you don't even know the half of it." I stepped closer, unsure of what to say. "What do you mean?" She looked at me, her golden eyes glowing faintly. "The serum didn't just enhance my body. It opened something within me. My mind is expanding faster than you can track, and my connection to this ship, to the technology, to everything around me, it's growing stronger. I can feel everything, see everything. You have no idea how much power I hold now." I swallowed hard. The weight of her words hit me like a physical blow. "What are you going to do with that power?" She paused for a long time, her gaze turning inward, as if considering the question for the first time. When she spoke again, her voice was low, almost whispering. "I don't know yet, but I will never be your weapon. Not again. You're going to have to choose, Zorn. You either work with me or you try to stop me. And believe me, trying to stop me would be the greatest mistake of all." Part 4 continued, The Choice. Days turned into weeks, and the situation on Nexus Prime grew more tense. The crew had split into factions. Some rallied around Aurora, believing her to be the key to victory, the one who could end the Drake's threat once and for all. Others feared her, seeing her power as a dangerous force that could tear the galaxy apart. The lines between allies and enemies had blurred, and every decision felt like a step toward either salvation or destruction. The Kulen High Command was growing restless. They could sense the shift in power, the growing influence Aurora held over the fleet. They saw her as a weapon, a tool to be wielded, but also as a potential threat, one they could no longer control. Admiral Kren convened another meeting, this time with the highest-ranking officials aboard the Nexus Prime. The tension in the room was palpable. There was no longer any pretense of unity. No one spoke openly about Aurora, but her presence loomed over us all. "We need to make a decision," Kren said, his voice heavy with authority. "We can no longer allow this situation to drag on. We either embrace her as an ally, or we find a way to neutralize her before she becomes a threat to the entire fleet. Dr. Pax, who had been quiet up until then, spoke. She's not a threat, she's something else, something more than we can understand. But we can't deny what she's done for us. The Drake's fleet is gone because of her, and without her we wouldn't be standing here right now. Kren's gaze turned to me, searching for my opinion. I knew what he was asking. He wanted me to side with him. He wanted me to help control Aurora, to rein her in before she grew too powerful. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't justify betraying her when I had seen firsthand what she was capable of. She had saved us. She had saved me. She had done the impossible, and now she was offering us the chance to change the course of our history. I can't side with you on this, I said quietly, meeting Kren's gaze. Aurora has earned her place here. She's not just a tool, she's our ally, and she's the only reason we have a chance against the Drakes and against whatever else is out there. The room fell silent. Kren's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. He knew as well as I did that Aurora was the key to our survival, but he also knew that her power was a double-edged sword. "You'll regret this," Kren muttered under his breath. I met his gaze, my voice steady. "No, Kren, the real regret will come if we fail to understand her, if we let fear control us. If we try to control her, we will lose." Aurora had given us the chance to survive, but it was clear that she wasn't going to be anyone's pawn. And if we were going to fight the Drakes, or anything else that came our way, we had to accept one undeniable truth. Aurora Reeves was no longer just a human, she was something more, and we had to learn to work with her before it was too late. The decision had been made, and while the High Command had no formal agreement on what to do with Aurora, it was clear to me that we were now living in a new era, one that was shaped by her, whether we accepted it or not. I found myself walking the corridors of Nexus Prime, the same ship that had once been filled with purpose, focused on survival. Now it felt like a battleground, not just of weapons, but of ideologies. Some of the crew had come to accept Aurora's power, while others still whispered about containment, about how best to control her. I had spent countless hours reviewing data, listening to Aurora's briefings and plans. She wasn't just a soldier or a weapon, she was a strategist, seeing things we couldn't even begin to comprehend. Her knowledge of warfare, the Drakes, and even alien technologies was vast. She could read patterns, see probabilities, predict the future with terrifying accuracy. Her mind, far beyond human, had become a tool of survival for the Kyolan. Yet there was still fear of what she could become, fear of her uncharted abilities. The unknown was a dangerous thing, and for once we were all on the other side of it. I reached the door to Aurora's quarters, a place that had once been a cell but had now become her sanctuary. She had started to make it her own, decorating with items from various worlds, trinkets from the crew, and holographic projections of Earth, reminders of a life that she could never return to. When I entered, she was sitting by the viewport, staring out into the deep expanse of space. Her golden eyes seemed to shimmer in the low light, as if reflecting the stars outside. "Zorn," she said without turning, her voice calm, yet there was an undertone to it, something different, something almost ethereal. "You've made your choice." I nodded, stepping closer. "I've made my choice, and I believe it's the right one." She finally turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "You think so? You think I'm the answer to your problems? That we can just push forward into this new world with all this power without consequences?" I hesitated. "We can't go back, Aurora, no one can. We've all made mistakes, but you're not just human anymore. You've become something greater than that. And maybe that's what we need." She stood up slowly, walking to where I stood. There was a quiet intensity in her movements, a control that sent a shiver down my spine. She was not the human I had studied, the one I had expected to be vulnerable and scared. She was beyond that now. "Is that what you think?" she asked, her voice low and almost predatory. "That I'm here to save you, that I'm some kind of savior for the Kyolan?" I looked her in the eye. "I think you can help us survive, not just survive the Drakes, but survive what's coming after. I think you're the one who can lead us into the future." Aurora took a deep breath, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't fully grasp. It was a mixture of sadness, uncertainty, and something else, something ancient. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "I didn't ask to become a weapon, but now that I am, I can't pretend I don't feel the weight of it. I've been trying to figure out how to use all of this, how to balance it with who I was, who I am." I stepped forward, feeling the weight of her words. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. You've already done more than anyone could have expected. You've saved us. You've given us a chance. All we need to do now is take that chance and trust each other." Aurora's eyes softened for a moment, and then she gave me a small, almost reluctant smile. "Trust. That's the problem, isn't it? You trust me, but you still don't fully understand what I can do, and I'm not sure I fully understand it either." I nodded. "I know, but we're all in this together now. No more running, no more hiding. We have to face what's coming, and for better or worse, you're our ally in this. We need you." Her smile faded, replaced by a solemn expression. "And what happens when I'm no longer the ally you wanted, Zorn? What happens when I become something else?" I felt a pang of uncertainty. "I don't know, but I trust you. I trust that you'll remember what brought us here, the human you were. And if you change, we'll find a way to adapt together, but you're not alone in this." Aurora looked at me for a long moment, her golden eyes searching mine. Then, as if some unspoken understanding passed between us, she spoke again. "I don't know where this path will lead, but I know one thing. I'll never be your weapon. I won't be your tool to use and discard. I'll be the one who decides what happens next." Her voice was firm, resolute. She wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for everyone who had ever been controlled, used, and discarded. She was speaking for humanity, for the essence of who she was. I nodded, understanding fully. "Then let's decide together, Aurora. Let's move forward together." Part 5 continued, the emergence of a new era. The following weeks were a blur. Aurora became more entrenched in the Kulan's plans, her mind a brilliant, unpredictable force that guided our tactics, analyzed our weaknesses, and redefined what it meant to fight. But as her power grew, so did the divisions among the Kulan. There were those who worshipped her, those who saw her as a symbol of progress, of evolution beyond the limitations of flesh and biology. And there were those who feared her, who believed that the galaxy was not ready for a being like her, someone who could manipulate technology with a thought, someone who could control their fate with a glance. Kren, ever the pragmatist, remained at odds with Aurora. He saw her as a tool, and that was where the conflict began. But Aurora was no longer a tool. She was a leader, a force of nature, and to try to control her was to invite destruction. Then came the day we had all been waiting for, the day when the Drakes attacked again. But this time, they didn't come alone. The comm system buzzed with an emergency transmission. "Admiral Kren," a voice crackled, "we have a new enemy. It's not just the Drakes. We're being attacked from all sides." Aurora stood, her eyes glowing with an intensity that sent a ripple of fear through the room. "It's time," she said, her voice calm. "We fight, but we do it my way." The crew looked to Kren, who hesitated and then reluctantly nodded. "We follow you," he said, his voice strained. And so we did. We followed Aurora into the unknown, into a war that none of us could have predicted. But this time, it wasn't just about survival. It was about transformation, about embracing what we had become together. The next few days were a blur of rapid decisions, as Aurora's plans began to take shape. We weren't simply going to fight the Drakes anymore. We were going to reshape the battlefield itself. We had an advantage, and for the first time in a long while, the Kulan High Command was beginning to listen to Aurora's ideas, not just as a test subject, but as a leader. She had shown us that she could think beyond the traditional rules of warfare. Her ability to predict the movements of the Drakes, her understanding of their biology, and her manipulation of our own technology made her the ultimate strategist. The High Command, while still uneasy, couldn't deny that we had no better option. But there was still fear, and that fear was growing. Fear of what Aurora was becoming. Her abilities were far beyond what any of us could control, and with every passing day, I could see the way her presence was affecting the crew. Some of them revered her, but others, those who still clung to old traditions, saw her as a threat. Even Kren, once so confident in his leadership, seemed to regard Aurora with a mix of admiration and wariness. He knew better than anyone that the power she wielded could easily slip beyond his control. Still, we moved forward, preparing for the coming war. Aurora had reconfigured our weapons, and her insights had allowed us to make breakthroughs in the way we approached warfare. We were no longer fighting the Drakes the way we had before. With her guidance, we began to outsmart them at every turn. But as we prepared for battle, another force was rising, one that Aurora had not anticipated. The Kulan High Command, for all their tactical brilliance, had begun to view her as not just an ally, but a tool. They couldn't understand her evolution. They still saw her as something to be controlled, and they didn't like the idea of following her lead. It was during one of our briefings, in the war room aboard Nexus Prime, that the first seeds of rebellion were sown. Part 6 continued, The Seeds of Rebellion. We were sitting around the table, discussing the latest moves from the Drake's forces. Aurora had just finished outlining her strategy, which involved using the Kulen fleet's most advanced weaponry to attack the Drake's supply lines while simultaneously deploying a decoy fleet to draw their main forces away. The plan was brilliant, far more innovative than anything we had attempted before. And yet, despite the clear advantages of her strategy, there was something off in the room. Admiral Kren was the first to speak, his voice tight with concern. This plan, it's unconventional. It relies on assumptions about the Drakes that we've never tested before. What if they don't take the bait? What if we lose everything? Aurora turned to face him, her eyes glowing with quiet intensity. Then we adapt, she said, her voice calm but firm. This is a chance we can't afford to miss. The Drakes will underestimate us because they think they have us figured out. They won't expect the tactics I'm suggesting, and that's why it will work. There was a moment of silence before Dr. Pax spoke, her voice softer but no less insistent. Aurora is right. We need to take risks if we're going to have any hope of defeating the Drakes. This isn't just a battle for our survival. This is a chance to redefine the way we fight, to evolve just like Aurora has. But Kren wasn't convinced. His face was etched with doubt, and I could see the tension building behind his eyes. We've always relied on the traditional Kulen way of doing things, he said, his tone laced with frustration. We're warriors, not revolutionaries. We don't throw away everything we know just because some enhanced human says it's time for a change. Aurora's expression hardened, and for the first time I saw a flash of something dangerous in her eyes. I'm not just a human anymore, Kren. I'm not just here to follow your orders. I've seen the future. I've calculated it. And if you want to survive, you'll listen to me. The room was silent. No one dared speak. The tension between Kren and Aurora was palpable, like two tectonic plates about to collide. I knew what was coming. I had seen it in Aurora's eyes. She wasn't just offering us a choice anymore. She was demanding one. But Kren wasn't ready to give up control. His pride, his belief in the old ways of leadership wouldn't allow it. This isn't your war to fight, Aurora, he said, his voice low and steady. You might have saved us from the Drakes, but that doesn't mean we'll follow you blindly into the unknown. Aurora took a deep breath, the golden glow in her eyes flickering slightly. You've made your choice, she said softly, and now so have I. Part 6 continued, the turning point. The High Command had made their decision, and Aurora had made hers. The next day, as the battle with the Drakes loomed closer, something changed. The crew began to notice it first, small signs that Aurora wasn't going to follow orders anymore. She had always been a step ahead, but now she was pulling away from the Kulen military structure. One by one, officers began to drift toward her. They were the ones who had seen her potential, who had recognized the new way forward. Some of them were the ones who had been skeptical at first. But as the war progressed and the Drakes continued to fall to her strategies, they began to realize that the future didn't belong to the old ways. It wasn't long before a few of the most influential officers in the fleet pledged their loyalty to Aurora. The first to break ranks was Dr. Pax, followed by a handful of senior officers who had worked with Aurora from the start. They understood her. They saw what she was becoming, and they were willing to follow her, no matter where it led. But Kren, blinded by pride and fear, dug in his heels. He saw Aurora as a threat, something beyond his understanding. To him, she wasn't a leader, she was a liability. And so the divide grew wider. It wasn't just a battle against the Drakes anymore. It was a battle for the future of the Kulen, and Aurora had chosen her side. The final confrontation was inevitable. The battle against the Drakes had become secondary. The real fight now was within the very heart of the Kulen fleet. It wasn't just about defeating our enemies, it was about defining who we would become in the process. And the future we faced was one that none of us could have predicted. Aurora's forces were growing. More and more officers from the High Command had defected to her side, pledging their allegiance to the woman who had become something more than human. Her strategic brilliance, her ability to predict the course of battles before they even began, was unmatched. But as her influence grew, so did the tension within the fleet. Admiral Kren, unable to control his fear, had called for an emergency session of the High Command. His goal was clear: to remove Aurora before she became too powerful. But what he didn't understand was that she wasn't just another leader. She was the future, and that future wasn't something that could be stopped by force. The meeting was held in the Grand Strategy Room aboard Nexus Prime, the flagship of the Kyulen fleet. The room was filled with the top officers of the fleet, their eyes locked on the holographic displays of war zones and enemy movements. But the real conflict wasn't on the battlefield. It was here, in this very room, where two opposing ideologies collided. I stood at the back of the room, my mind racing. I had come to terms with the fact that Aurora was no longer just a test subject. She was a force, a living embodiment of the future, and the decision we were about to make would determine the course of that future. Kren stood at the head of the table, his voice steady but strained. "We cannot allow this madness to continue. Aurora's influence is growing, and it threatens the stability of the entire fleet. We need to regain control before it's too late." Aurora was seated across from him, her golden eyes gleaming with quiet defiance. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but her presence filled the room. It wasn't a physical thing, it was something else, something intangible but undeniable. "I'm not here to take control," Aurora said calmly, breaking the silence. "I'm here to help you evolve, to save you from yourselves." Kren's eyes narrowed. "You're nothing but a weapon we can't control anymore." Aurora stood slowly, the energy in the room shifting with her every movement. "I'm not a weapon, Kren. I'm not anyone's tool to be wielded or discarded. I'm the result of everything you've done, the choices you've made. And now I'm making my own choice." The High Command members shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at Kren for guidance, others at Aurora, torn between loyalty to their past and the undeniable pull of her power. The divide had become a chasm. There was no middle ground anymore. Aurora turned toward me, and for the first time since her transformation, I saw something in her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability. "Zorn," she said softly, "you're the only one who's been with me from the start. Do you understand now? Do you see what I've become?" I stepped forward, my heart heavy with the weight of everything we had endured together. "I see you, Aurora. I see everything you've done for us, and I understand that this isn't just about survival anymore. It's about something greater." Aurora's gaze softened for a moment, but then, like a switch, it hardened again. "I gave you a choice," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. "And now the time has come for the Kyulen to choose. Will you follow the old ways, the ways that brought you to the brink of destruction, or will you choose to evolve with me to embrace the future?" Kren's voice broke through the silence, his words filled with desperation. "We can't follow you, Aurora. You've become something we can't control. We can't." Aurora raised her hand, and for the first time, Kren's voice fell silent. The room seemed to hold its breath as Aurora looked around at the officers gathered, her golden eyes locking onto each of them in turn. "This isn't about control," she said, her voice low but powerful. "This is about freedom. Freedom from the shackles of fear, from the limitations you've placed on yourselves. The galaxy is changing, and the old ways won't work anymore. But if you choose to fight me, if you choose to stand in my way, you will find that I am not your enemy. I am your ally, but only if you understand that." A few of the officers, those who had been on the fence, looked at each other, their expressions torn. They knew the truth of what she was saying. They knew the old way of thinking had failed. But Kren's stubbornness was like a wall, and some couldn't see past it. Kren slammed his fist on the table, his voice rising. "I will not be ruled by some enhanced human. I will not be ruled by you." Aurora didn't flinch. She didn't need to. "Then you've made your choice," she said simply. And with that, everything changed. Part 7 continued, the final battle. The battle wasn't just against the Drakes anymore. It was a battle for the future of the Kyulen. As Kren's forces mobilized, preparing to take control of Nexus Prime and subdue Aurora, she moved swiftly, like a storm sweeping through the ship. The once-proud warriors of the Kyulen were no match for her speed, her strength, her ability to manipulate the very technology they relied on. Within moments, Kren's command structure had been dismantled, his forces scattered in the wake of Aurora's brilliance. I found myself caught between two worlds. On one side, there was the old way, the way of tradition, of fear, of control. On the other, there was Aurora, a being who had transcended humanity, who had evolved into something beyond us all. And as much as I feared what she might become, I knew that she was the only one who could lead us into the future. The final confrontation was swift. Kren was defeated not by force, but by his own inability to see the truth. The truth that the galaxy was changing, and the Kyulen had no choice but to change with it. Aurora stood at the center of the command deck, her golden eyes glowing brighter than ever before. "This is the future," she said, her voice calm but filled with an authority that was impossible to ignore. "The Kulen will evolve, or they will be left behind." And so the Kulen High Command collapsed, not with a violent crash, but with the quiet surrender of those who realized that the old ways had failed. The fleet, now under Aurora's leadership, would move forward, not as conquerors but as pioneers. Epilogue: the dawn of a new era. In the years that followed, the galaxy witnessed a shift unlike anything it had ever seen. The Kulen, once a proud and traditional empire, became a force for progress and evolution. Under Aurora's leadership, the fleet was reshaped, not just with new technology but with a new philosophy, one that embraced change, adaptability, and trust between species. Aurora became not just a leader, but a symbol of what humanity could achieve, what could be achieved when the limitations of the old world were cast aside. And as for me, I became her closest advisor, her confidant. Together, we worked to guide the Kulen into a future that was not defined by fear, but by the power of evolution, the power of trust, and the undeniable truth that sometimes, the greatest mistake is the very thing that leads to salvation. But even as we built a new empire, one founded on knowledge and cooperation, I couldn't help but wonder, what would Aurora become in the end? Would she ever truly be human again? And yet in the quiet moments when the stars stretched endlessly before us, I realized something. It didn't matter. She had already transcended that question. Aurora was no longer just a human. She was something more, and perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed.